So I'm going to start recording now. Okay, so I'm going to start by just showing my screen so that you can make sure you have a single course kind of template set up so that you can follow through. No, Google Chrome. Okay, are you seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. If you haven't already, sign into Schoology. Does everyone have that link to get into our Plano version of Schoology? You should. It should have come from district. When you're in there, go up to your courses. Now, you probably started on a different page than I had showing, but you should still have this same header here. We're going to click on courses, and then you're going to want to find the My Courses over here on your right-hand side. And then when you get over here, you're going to have this blue button that says create a course. If you click on that, we can create, typically you'll hear the word sandbox thrown around. That means a template course where you start building that you can pull from and use in other settings. So if you have a particular course in mind, 8th grade history, like whatever you're thinking of a course that you want to start setting up, go ahead and label that here. You know, with whatever that course name is. So for example, my sandbox name is 8th grade computers. There it is. And then I just call it, you know, sandbox as my way of labeling, hey, this is the place where I'm gonna build, experiment, and create that can be pulled over to a real section when district gives it to us later. So go ahead and label that for whatever it is. You don't have to worry about what section it is, except for the fact that you have to have something filled into that line, right? For subject area, choose your subject area. None of that's really going to matter because we're going to be pulling from it, right? It's just a temporary holding spot. The one thing you do want to make sure, though, is down here in this grading period section, scroll yourself all the way down and find that sandbox section, because that's the only live time frame that's unlocked for us right now. If we don't choose that, we can't play with grade settings yet. So fill that out to get through here. And then when you're ready, go ahead and click create. And what'll happen is it will take you to a page that is the course. So you should see your course name here and kind of this blank setup screen that I'm showing on my window. Is everyone at this point? Do you need a couple minutes to do the actual creating? Okay, so
I'm good to go.
you're good to go?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the future, as you come back to this, remember, it's going to be a course of yours labeled under courses, right? So I've got a bunch that I've been working with, but you'll find whatever that sandbox section is, that's where we're going to be working today. I'm going to open up the one I had set up for today. So we're all in a page like this. The purpose of this session, and let me help clarify this here. So I'm switching to a Google Slides real quick, guys. I was talking to Mark this morning, and we want to be real clear on the grading that we're doing. In the past, right, if you look at last year, whatever work we collected, whether it was digitally in Google Classroom, whether it was pieces of paper in class that we graded or rubrics that we filled out, all of that stuff we gathered and we put directly into our Power School, right, our Power Teacher gradebook. This year, we're going to still do all of that regular grading, whether it's digital, whether it's you're grading a discussion in class or a presentation that a kid does live. Like, it's going to be different this year. I don't think you're going to be collecting worksheets, but whatever it is that you collect and you grade, instead of going straight into the Power School gradebook this year, we're going to be going into the Schoology gradebook. So Schoology is our working gradebook, our day-to-day. If a parent says, where do I check my kids' grades? The answer this year is Schoology. And so that's our live working gradebook. Then Schoology is going to sync with our Power School gradebook, and that's only going to happen for reports, for mid-quarter report and end-of-quarter report. So Power School this year is more of our attendance taking and our final reporting tool, whereas Schoology is our kind of live in the moment working gradebook. Okay, so just to understand, like, that's, and this is what we're setting our grading up for today. Like that's the purpose of today. Now, before I jump into that, there are two schools of thoughts on grading, and because Schoology handles them differently, we need to kind of identify right now where you're at, which side you're on. So if you are a like there's traditional grading, how you've always graded, A through F, point percentage based, grade whatever you want, label it, and they get a score on a report card, letter grade. This is what I'm going to set up today with people. If you are wanting to do mastery grading, meaning standards-based grading, a gradeless classroom, whatever label you want to put on it, if you're interested in doing this, I talked to Mark this morning and he said, and I quote, "This is the year to do it. Anyone in the building can try this." But if you want to do that, we set the gradebook up differently. So I guess before we dive in, I want to make sure I give you guys what you need. Are you guys planning on sticking traditional this year? Like Jen, I know our discussions were centered around doing this, right? The mastery grading. I don't know, Jen, how many other teachers are going to want this. This is probably something better for us to do in a separate session if there's not a lot of other teachers on board with it. But if you're sticking traditional, we can get this done in about 15 minutes today.
Yeah, my plan was definitely to stay traditional.
Stay traditional, get into the digital environment, and then reassess grading at a different time.
Sure.
Okay. Kathleen, where are you kind of leaning?
Probably traditional this year.
Okay.
And then, I mean,
Okay.
maybe potentially making that switch
Training.
eventually, but
Okay.
not this year.
Well, I'm positive that some of us, myself included, are going to be doing this mastery grading. I think, Jen, we're all still on board with that.
Yeah. Do I need to be here then, or should I?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, Jen, I probably would recommend you, follow along if you want to, but I'm not going to address this right now because it's entirely different setup.
Okay, then I will talk to you all later.
All right.
See you,
Have a
Jen.
good day. Nice seeing you. All right. So for our traditional grading, I'm going to hop back over to my Zoom course. So here's what we're going to look at. This is the grade book over here on the left. That is going to be our working, functioning grade book. We set that up in the section underneath it called Grade Setup. So if you click there, today we're going to set our categories and then set any scales that we might need. We'll start with categories. When Schoology shoots grades over to PowerSchool, the categories have to match up. So if you think back to last year's your grade book setup, you had categories set up. Now, I don't know if you guys use categories like summative, 80%, formative, 20%, or if you did categories like assignments, homework, tests, all at different percentages or not. Do you guys know kind of do you remember what you used traditionally?
I think I had homework was 25%, and then I'm going to log in, but I think it was assessment was the 75%.
Yeah, mine was summative assessments for 75, and I think classwork or something was the 25.
So we'll want to, we can set up that PowerSchool side whenever we want to. If you can remember those categories, then it should be easier to copy them over from last year to next year within that system. The important thing is whatever categories we put here have to match exactly to PowerSchool so that it can shoot them over in the right spot for reporting purposes. That makes sense? Yeah. Okay, so it's real simple to make your categories. If you click this add button up here, I think one of you said summative, right? Just label your category like you would have in PowerSchool. Now, I don't know how you grade like your actual assignments, but if the number of points that you put on an assignment matters, so a 100-point project is graded heavier than a 10-point homework assignment in the same category, then stick to total points because it'll account for the fact that you've applied more points to an assignment. If everything is just one big pile of grades, then switch to percent. So scoring 90 on a 100-point project will be the same as scoring 9 out of a 10-point assignment if you go percentage. So choose whichever one is appropriate for how you want to grade. And then if you are asking the gradebook to drop below a score or not, I don't know where you guys fall with that. I don't. But then when you create your category, it'll put that category in. Now it doesn't weight them yet. So what I recommend doing is just putting in all the categories that you know you're going to need first. So if I was, for example, a summative formative person, go back in then and add your formative or your homework or whatever you guys called it, and match it up as the same calculation style. And then it's going to put them in, and then to provide weight to one category or the other, check that weight categories box. It's going to split them equally by default. So if you have 4 categories in there, they'll all split at 25% apiece weight wise. But what we can do, I can't change the percentage directly, but if I treat this as a value totaling up to 100, it'll apply that weight. So if I say my summative is going to be 80% and my formative is going to be 20%, as long as those weight values that I put in there add up to 100, it'll calculate that percentage for me. So now when I put anything in my grade book or assignments or anything, if I label it summative, Schoology is going to calculate it in that category at that weight towards total grade.
So if we put things in as points last year and like then our categories were just weighted, that we should do the same thing then, right? Have the
right. Yeah, right. So right now your categories were, you mean your assignments within the category were weighted by points?
yeah.
Then you're going to want to, when you create this, you're going to want to tell it that you're using a total point scheme. Does that make sense? Then you can weight that category. That's separate of how you're calculating within that category. Right? So this represents how you calculate within the category. This represents how the categories compare percentage-wise to the whole final grade.
Yeah, no, that works. That's generally, Kathleen, that's the way I've done it, where, you know, if I ask for a paragraph, it's a summative grade, but it's only 10 points compared to a full-on essay is 30 or something. They both go in the summative category.
The people that'll end up switching from total points to percent are people more like me, where everything gets graded with, say, a standard scaled rubric. So whether it's a big project or a little project, you're scoring in a certain category. Those are your percentage-based people. But if you're point weighted, make sure you click that there, and make sure you do that when you make each category so that it doesn't start miscalculating across each other or within category. Okay. Do you guys have your category set up? Are you good there?
Yeah.
Okay. The only other thing that I was going to offer this morning are the grading scales. Now, it sounds like you guys are sticking traditional, which is perfect. It defaults to a numeric-based grading scale, a traditional percentage-based type scale. So based on the number of points and the weights in your categories, when I say scale, I mean the scale of how students are given a grade at the end of adding everything up, right? Whether it be on an assignment or at the end, like their final grade, if they're at an 88 out of 100, then that's an 88% that gives them a B, right? It defaults to just the numeric. Let me show you what this looks like versus the A plus minus scale. You might want to switch over, you might not. These scales calculate the same, 100% scale, you know, A, B, C, D, traditional 60, 70, 80, 90% ranges. The difference is how they show up to the student in the Schoology gradebook. If you have numeric set as your default, only that number scores. So if a kid gets a 9 out of a 10 on assignment, in the gradebook, they'll see 90%, 9 out of 10. If you switch to the letter one, they'll see A, 9 out of 10, or A, 90%. And they'll get that letter attached to that score. It's really just a matter of what do you want the kids to see when they're looking at it. So here, if I switch, I'm gonna switch courses real quick because I was messing around with it so that you can see. I think it was in here. Actually, self-paced. So here's the difference in our, well, of course, I have too many. There it is. Okay, so in our gradebook, if you start creating assignments, and you start, scoring them. What I did is I've got a couple kids that are scored in here. So in these examples, right, you put in a score, 17 out of 20, a 2 out of 20, and it calculates based off those category weights that we just assigned. What you want to see, though, is what does the student see? And so if I view this course as a student, which you can do by going to your course options, when a student is like, what's my grades? What am I looking at? When they come in, they see this view, and when they click on their grades, there we go. Oh, geez, excuse on all of them. Let me try. Let me give some real grades. Oh, I gave the grades to Mr. Green, so let me try him. So if I view the course as Mr. Green here we go. When he comes in and he looks at his grades as a student view, there we go. So here's the difference. This one right here, this is if you leave that numeric scale checked, right? So the kid sees their grade as what they scored out of what was totaled. If you switch to that A plus grade scale, the kids see what they scored, but they also see the letter grade associated with that score. That's literally the only difference in the calculations. It doesn't calculate any different. They're both 100-point percent scales. So depending on which one you want to see, the kids to see, then in your courses, where we are at here with our grade setup, just choose the star of the one that you want applied to your course. And if you do that, as you create assignments, it will default to that scale so that that's what shows through and applies when the kids go in and look at their Schoology grade book, which this year is their active working grade. Does that make sense? They get confusing. Now, there's nothing to do work-wise except choose that star for your preference. Here's where else those scales come in. Do either of you ever use rubrics in assessment?
Yeah.
Yes. Does your rubric, is it like a 1, 2, 3, 4 scale? Is it a 7, 8, 9? Like as you, at point value wise, what does your rubric look like as far as the columns, right? The possible
1, 2, 3, 4 usually.
The 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So you don't need to do anything really then, except as you create your rubrics. So in that rubric section, there's the add rubric button. It defaults, Steve, to a 4, 3, 2, 1 scale. You can adjust those categories, right? Like the labels of what they are. And here's why I recommend doing that. They do a 4, 3, 2, 1 scale, and they label 2 as satisfactory. But if I use this and I apply it to an assignment, the kid's scoring a 2 out of a 4. And according to our point-based gradebook, that's a failing 50%.
Right.
I wouldn't call that satisfactory. So here's what I recommend doing to save yourself some time throughout the year, especially if you do more than one rubric. Go to that rubrics place and go to add scale, right? Basically, we can set a scale that gets applied to our rubrics. So for example, if I go to scale here and I do a point-based scale, a percentage-based, hold on, let me think this one through. A point-based scale. Click on points-based scale, and then maybe I'll call this my history rubric scale, label it for what it is. You can set, if you do that 4, 3, 2, 1 scale, you can still set those point values, right? But you can put your own description. So like I call mine more of a standards-based thing, right? Advanced, what do I call it? Proficient, basic, and emerging. So whatever those labels that you use are, you can put in here. And if you want to adjust your scale, you can adjust it, right? Like I do, Steve, I don't do a 4, 3, 2, 1 because I know that it has to mesh up with my point-based grade book.
Yeah,
So what I do is I say a kid who scores perfect is actually an A. So I do a 10-point scale, and I say a kid who's proficient is actually a B. A kid who's basic is actually a C, and a kid who's emerging I consider to be a D. So I do like a 10, 8, 7, 6 type
Okay.
scale.
Okay,
So that way
sense.
my points match up to my labels, match up to my grade book.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No,
But
I read.
so here's why you would do this though, and why you would take the time to set this scale up first. So now when I click Save Changes, and I have to refresh after I do this to make sure that it takes in the system usually. But now I have this scale that I can use. So when I come back here and I go to add my own rubric, whether it be like project 1 or whatever your history thing that you're adding the scale is, remember it defaults to that 4, 3, 2, 1. But now that I've created my own, I have this applied grading scale. And look, I can apply my scale to my rubric and it'll update. And if I had, 5 criteria, it would update all 5 criteria across my scale that I applied. So when I go to make my rubrics, instead of having to set the scale, like if I had 5 criteria, right? Instead of having to set this 5 different times and label it 5 different times, I can just get my scale applied, give my descriptions for that particular rubric, and I'm good to go, right? And then I can save that rubric right after I create it, whatever my descriptions are. After I create that rubric, now when I go to make my assignments and my projects, I can apply this rubric directly to an assignment without having to create it every time. So I called it project 1. Realistically, like if I was actually making my own rubrics, I'll show you, I can give examples here. Right, I wouldn't call my rubrics by project if it was me. Oh, let me look at my 7th grade, sorry. What I would do is I would label the rubric based on how I apply it. So like a project rubric, my assignment rubric, or my presentation rubric, whatever that would look like. So like my 7th grade, it depends on the type of project. Like if it's an individual with no like computer science, it gets that rubric. If it's all of them, it covers that rubric. But then as I create my assignments, I'm just attaching the rubric instead of having to create it every time.
Sure. Yeah. I'll
Okay.
make that.
So
that takes a lot out of it once it's done.
I think so. But that gets confused sometimes to people, is that step is actually in the grade setup. You have to actually, just like I showed you in that grade setup, make that scale to apply to a rubric that you can then apply to an assignment. So it's not necessarily super intuitive in my opinion. Those were the 2 things I wanted to cover with this session, was getting those categories and those scales set up. Do you have any questions or individual how do I's type things?
I don't think so. I mean, for me, I feel like that covers it.
And then Steve, I don't know like how your sections are split up or anything. Remember, anything you create in one course can be carried over, copied as a whole course or individually components pulled out. So if you make your scales in this course and you need to use them for a different course, you can pull just the scales over if you need to. You don't have to copy the whole course. So set them up as like their own individual thing, and then you can use them however you need.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, Kathleen, you good? Good. All right.
Yeah.
All right. If you guys log in later, I'll see you then. If not, reach out with any questions. Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Take it easy. We'll see
No
you.
problem. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.
See you, Kathleen.
Bye.